Okay, so what I'm going to be doing in this video is basically just showing you how I'm going to be setting up some external drives in order to be able to use them as a backup, because at the moment on my main machine I have sort of like a RAID drive, and basically at the moment it's about 11 terabytes, but then I've got another drive I've added to it. Now the problem that I have there, because of how big it is that the it's hard to back up. So as you can see, I've got sort of the backup external, which I've been using to so that backup external is what I backed it up on initially. But of course, external drives at that time, the biggest one when I bought it was like 12 gigs, but obviously the size is 12 terabytes, but the size has gone up now. But even now, the biggest external you can get seems to be about 14 or maybe 16 terabytes. So, but the problem there is that if I'm going to be running a backup and I've got like it's going to be like about sort of 14 terabytes of data, then basically even the biggest drive, eventually the backups, the old backups are going to take up too much space. So what I realized that I had to do is actually, rather than wait for a huge external drive to come along, the only real thing I could do was to actually get 3 10 terabyte disks, and that's what I've done. But the only thing is I bought 2 other 10 terabyte disks, and I've already got backup data already on this particular disk. So what I've decided to do is to set these two, basically I want to set all 3 disks up as a RAID 5. And I know people keep saying RAID is not backup, but in this case, RAID, it is for my backup. But of course the RAID isn't backup, but the RAID is being used for backup, which I've sort of done before, in other places. So basically, as you can see, the SDN1 contains my old backup. Sorry, the current backup, I should say. And the other 2 disks that I have, 10 terabyte ones, are the SDM and the SDO. So what I'm basically going to do is to create a RAID using the SDM and the SDO. But what I have to do is I have to do it in such a way so that I don't use the original drive in a RAID at the beginning. So what I basically had to do is I'm going to create the RAID, and using the 2 devices, and I have to put one of them as missing, which is how this one is basically going to replace the missing drive once the data has been copied across. So I'm going to make this RAID. And so as you can see, it's level 5. It's got 3 RAID devices, 512K chunk, and it's got a bitmap. So basically, I'm going to press return on that. So you can see previous data is on there, but obviously I don't really care about that. So I'm going to continue creating it. Alright, and so that's it. So now that RAID disk has started, which is MD8, and so if I check to see what RAIDs I have running, or RAID drives I should say. Yeah, see, so basically there it is MD8, and it's now active. So it's using 2 USB external drives, but one's missing. So what I now have to do is basically I need to format this file system, the MD8, and then I need to, well, what I'm going to do actually, just to make it easier, I'm going to put an image of, basically I'm just going to image SDN1 straight onto MD8 and then just expand it later. So basically, so first thing I'm going to do is just create the file system. So I've done 10 million inodes because I don't really need much more than that, because I'm going to be using Borg backup. And the good thing about Borg is it doesn't actually create that many small files, and you can keep sort of multiple copies. But because Borg is a deduplicating backup, you don't actually need to have that many inodes on your backup device to basically store Borg's files. Right, so I'm gonna get rid of the journal, because I have to admit the reason why I get rid of the journal is because I've actually, when you look on the sort of some of the bug reports for the X4 file system, you find a lot of times something funny will happen in the kernel, and then it will corrupt the journal, and then the kernel will replay the journal it'll replay the corrupt journal onto the file system and mess the file system up, which would have been okay. So rather than risk some random bug being introduced because the journal decides to be corrupted and the kernel replays it onto a good file system, I prefer to just make do with losing a few files if something happens, and not have the journal be able to destroy the file system. And so most of the time I just actually disable the journal. And also I don't need extended attributes either. Yeah, because I'm not going to, because the other thing is the files that are backed up, even if they got extended attributes, they're going to be inside the Borg archive. So the file system itself doesn't have to sort of handle that. Yeah, I think I'll go ahead 64-bit. Okay, let's try that. Oh, actually, I just realized, yeah, this is just a waste of time. I don't actually need the file system. Yeah, I don't know why I was doing that. But anyway, I'll just let this finish. If you're going to make a file system, this is how you do it. But I just realized that I'm actually going to just be putting the image of the backup straight onto it. Right, so now basically I've got the RAID, which is MD8, and that consists of two 10 terabyte external drives. So now what I have to do is I have to transfer the image of this drive, which is the SDN1, so the file system is on SDN1, onto that MD8. So to do that, I'm just going to use DD Rescue. So first I have to unmount the backup drive, and then now in order to copy the image of the file system across, I'm just going to use DD Rescue. So then the originator is, just so I get it right, don't type the wrong thing in. So that's where the file system's coming from, and then it's going to MD8. And so as expected, it won't let you overwrite it unless you force it. So we add the force flag and then press return. And so basically now the one sort of 10 terabyte external drive file system is now being copied onto the other two external drives. And also, just in case you're interested, I'm just going to show you the actual, because basically I have the three external drives connected to a USB card which has three separate chips on it. And what it is I'm just going to see. Yeah, so here they are. So basically it's a it's using a what are the names? I forgot the name of the company now. Oh, that's right, yeah, starttech.com. So it's a starttech.com 4-port USB 3 controller card. And basically what that card actually has, each port has its own separate controller. So you can see that there's four UPD 720202 controllers, and there's 4 controllers on the card. And the reason why I got that is for the obvious reason that because each controller is one controller per disk, what that means is that when you're copying data between the two external drives, it's actually going through, each one is going through its own controller card. So of course that allows you to have like a proper RAID where the card isn't like a bottleneck. And one thing you'll find is that this card can be a bit difficult to get working sometimes, because it actually has these sort of pericom semiconductors, they're like some bridge chips, and the bridge chip is actually on the card itself. So sometimes the kernel can get a bit confused if you've got your IOMMU turned on. Alright, so I'm going to leave that for now and then come back to it once it's finished copying, which is going to take a while, because as you can see, yeah, see, so far it's copied 50 gigs, which is pretty, it's pretty good. So all I'm going to do is just come back once it's finished doing that copy and see if the file system on the RAID will actually mount. Okay, so as you can see, the resize is, sorry, the copy is finished. So now the file system image is onto the two disks which are acting as the RAID. So what I now have to do is to, because one problem that I noticed with this particular file system, the 10 terabyte one, is that if I do if I check the status of the file system, then what you see is it has resize inode, but there's no 64-bit. And what that means is that even if I try to resize it, it will not go past 16 terabytes. But of course, I'm after roughly 19 terabytes with the two 10 terabyte disks. So in order to do that, first I have to convert the file system to 64-bit. So the way that I do that is you just use a resize 2fs command, and yeah, so the -b is just progress, but -b, what that does is it converts it from, hopefully it'll add the 64-bit to the sort of file system features, which means that it can go beyond 16 terabytes. Right, so it wants me to check it first. Alright, so I've got to force it. Okay, the file system is not that full. So this is one good thing about X4. Because if I'd have been doing this with an X2 file system, the first thing is that it wouldn't be able to go past 16 terabytes no matter what. Because it doesn't have the extra features. And also, when you check a file system that's big on X2 or even X3, it takes forever to do the check, but they put some changes into the X4 code so that now the file system checks are quicker. Yes, as you see, that was pretty fast for 10 terabytes, even though there's not that many files on there. Okay, let's see what this conversion does. And of course, this was only added in the 1.43 E2FS Progs series. So if you're running an ancient distribution, which only has 1.42, then you won't actually be able to convert it to 64-bit, because that's just a feature they added. I think it was after 2016 they added that. Okay, so that's finished now, and but one thing's interesting, they don't seem to have changed they've used the same text as for the resize, because of course the blocks is the same length as it was before. Because if we look at see, block count is 8704. So it's the same length. I don't even know why they say that. What it should say is your file system is now 64-bit. But anyway, let's stop complaining about nothing and go to the next part. So we're just going to resize it to maximum size. And let's see how long that is. Well, let's just do it anyway. Yes, it's going up to 4.8, so it's doubling the size, which is what you'd expect with 2 disks now. And the reason that works is because now it will have the 64-bit in it. which I forgot to check, but obviously it's, as this wrong message says, the file system dev MD8 is now 64 bits. Okay, so now the message is saying the right thing. So it's saying that the file system is now this amount of blocks long. So if we do a check of it again, you can see that, yeah, the block count is the 48 whatever. But the important thing is that it's got 64 bit. But the only problem I've got is that it's supposed to be a feature which is turned on, which clashes with resize IOMMU, so I'm a bit surprised. Yeah, actually, I think it's motherboard, I think. Yeah. So hopefully the file system isn't gonna get corrupted because of that. Because you're supposed to, because the resize IOMMU is supposed to be removed, and I think motherboard should be there in its place. So what I'm gonna do is just gonna try and mount it first. So let me just check. The other one isn't mounted. I just want to change its label as well. Spelling there, thought the file system was dead. Yes, that's the old name, so let's call it just check that. So now it's got the new name. So now if I want to mount it, I don't have to use the MD anymore. So if I want to mount it in where it was previously, there you have it. So it's as simple as that to get the new file system mounted. And yeah, so it's 19 terabytes, and so we got 9.83. So that looks like it's successful so far, because the fact that file system mounts is the most important thing, because if that's the part which doesn't happen if there's a problem. But as far as the file system driver is concerned, this file system is okay. Right, so the next thing I'm going to have to do is to basically, I'm going to copy the well, no, actually it's copied already. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to do like a test backup to be sure, and then once that works with the two drives, then I'm just going to show you how to add the third drive in, the one that currently has the backup on it. Okay, so this is just an update on the progress. So basically I've done the backup with Borg, so the backup's finished. But of course now it's actually doing a repository check. And what I noticed that when it was doing the check, well, I noticed something that I thought I might as well add to the to this video, because it was an interesting piece of information. Because basically what's happened is because as you know, I've set up it as a RAID 5, so of course that means that it's actually using 3 disks total. So at the moment I'm doing the Borg backup on 2 of the disks with one of them as acting, well, one of them is actually missing. So if you check yes, if you check the output of the sort of RAID configuration, two of the disks are in use in it, and one of them is missing. So what I want to do is I just want to make sure the backup finishes properly, so that I know that this RAID is good, and then I'm going to add the previous backup disk as a third disk, so that you've got 1 disk redundancy. And The interesting thing about that, as you saw in the space usage, I've only got 5 terabytes left, so it looks like I might have to, and this is an advantage with doing it this way, is that I might have to buy another 10 terabyte disk and add it to the RAID, which would give me another sort of 9 point something terabytes. So that's another good thing about doing it this way rather than having single disks, is that if I need to expand the backup size, I could just buy another 10 terabyte and add it to this current RAID, and that gives you more space on the backup. And of course, I can, because it's a RAID, I can lose one of the backup disks and replace it. And even if something happens with another one, usually the hard drives aren't completely dead, so I'll even be able to take it out of the case and put it into another, like a caddy or something, to still use it. So to me, this is a good backup system, even though, of course, a load of people will be crying RAID isn't backup, but in this case, RAID is backup. Isn't that interesting? So what I wanted to show in this one is that as the board is finished, you notice now it's doing a repository check. And the thing about it is, if this was on a single disk, then there would be a certain maximum speed that it would be able to read the disk at. But what's interesting that I found is that when I look at this speed that it's reading at, it's actually reading at, here it's sort of, roughly 270, even 280 megabytes a second. And interestingly enough, that's actually faster than a single disk. So because I actually have this set up as RAID 5, what it means is that when Borg does the check, it actually takes advantage of the multiple disks. So I'm actually getting a check speed which is faster than it would have been if I'd have been doing a single disk. So this is another good reason for having your external drives as a RAID. And that is that if you're going to use Borg to do the backup, then when it's doing its consistency check, it's actually quicker when you've got multiple USBs. And of course, having a USB card with separate chips, that helps as well. Alright, so I thought I'd just quickly show this, just to show you another advantage of doing your backups this way. And, if anyone else does it this way, then I'd be interested to see what results they get as well. Okay, so I'm just continuing with the process after I did the backup and made sure it could finish. So what's happened is, so I've done basically I've made sure that the backup ran, and as you can see, it ran for 1 day and 30 minutes. And it's, but then it basically got to the repository check part, and that was taking forever, so I just cancelled it there. But basically with Borg, once you get this particular part of the output, then you know that the backup is safely finished, and so it's okay to quit it at that point. So now, since I've restarted the machine, the RAIDs have been detached. So what I now have to do is basically assemble that RAID again, and there is a way to get it to it's a sort of auto assemble, but I'm going to sort of deal with that at the end. So as you can remember from before, I had two drives that I'd set up in the RAID, and the third drive had the old data on it, so I didn't want to add that to the RAID until I checked it. But now that I've restarted up, see, basically the 3 drives are showing up here as M1, N1, and O1, but of course I don't know which one is the RAID one and which one not, and because I haven't set it to auto, I haven't put them in the config file, then the MD-ADM has no way to be able to assemble them using the UUIDs. So the way to find out which drive is which is I basically have to go into I have to use this command, which is basically MD-ADM minus examine, and so I just have to do it for each drive. So first I'll do SDM M1, and so I can see that is a RAID drive, and you can see it's Yeah, see there's 2 drives in it, and there's one, the dot is for the missing one, and so this is device 0. And so if I then do SDN1, it says there's no super block on there, so that's obviously the old drive. And then if I do SDO1, then you can see that's actually device 1, and it's from the same RAID, and you see it's got the UUID there, the sort of 4B, well that's the device UUID, and you see that's the array UUID 627, see, so that's the same, so we know it's from the same RAID. So what we now have to do is assemble that, and the way to do that is mdadm minus assemble, and it's dev, I want to call it md8, and then it's dev. So the first device 0 is SDM1, and device 1 is SDO1, but it doesn't actually matter. It doesn't actually matter that the order you put them in when you're assembling. It's only when you're creating that it makes a difference. But I'll just do it anyway, just so you can see the order in which the drives are. So when I do that assemble, it will say that the RAID has been started with 2 drives out of 3. And so if we, I'm just gonna, something I didn't do from before. So if you do, yes, you do get the label, and so that's our label. And so what I'm just going to do is just make a copy of that. Right. So now to make sure that's okay, what I'm going to do is just edit the FS tab. And you can see here where I had where the old RAID was back, sorry, the old single external drive was backed up. So I'm just going to change the label on that to the new one. Right. Now I was just going to show you that in this line here, see that's where it's going to be mounted. But what I've done is I've actually made it no auto. So what that means is that when you do mount space -A, it won't look for the externals, because obviously sometimes the externals won't be connected. So I don't want it to come up with an error on boot when it's trying to look for this particular device. But I just want to mount it manually, because that's usually a good thing to do with backup drives, because if say your machine gets I don't know, gets an attack or something, then say a virus tries to delete your files, it's usually best to not have your backup drive attached or mounted at least, so that if when something happens to cause some sort of corruption, it won't affect the data on your backup. And so you shouldn't really connect your backup drive when you're actually doing a backup, and this is when you're not using it. And then when you're using it, it's usually best to have the backup unmounted, just for safety reasons. So I'm just going to save that. Right. So now if I do -A, so now you can see that oh yeah, sorry, I forgot. Yeah, it doesn't work with mount -A. So I just basically showed what I was talking about earlier. So to mount it, you have to actually mount it specifically. Right, so now you can hear them spinning up, and now if I do the DF, you can see that the new space is there. So it's 19 terabytes and sort of 5.4 terabytes available. So if I sort of see what the RAID setup is like. Yeah, so you can see that the MD8 up the top here. So you see at the moment it's got a drive missing. So now the next thing that I want to do is to add that last drive into this particular RAID. So if I check out what the sort of partitions are, and so usually the best thing is to get the partitions and then get the RAID output, and then so we can see that the RAID is using SDM1 and SDO1, and the disk we want to add obviously is going to be SDN1. So then we just do MD Adam, and so it's just dev MD8, and then we just -A to add the drive, and it's -dev SDN1. Now when I press return on this, it's going to complain. Oh, it actually added it, that's a surprise. The reason I was surprised is because it did actually have a file system on it. So I was a bit surprised that it added the drive, even though the file, because usually it doesn't do that, but anyway. So if we now go back into the MD stats, then we can see what's happening. And we can see that the drive is actually it's building, and the speed actually seems quite impressive as well. Okay, it's just because it maxed. I was surprised it actually maxed out at the 200 megabytes per second, because that's actually the maximum speed by default that it will run at. So I just thought I'd increase the maximum speed limit to see if it will speed up. Yeah, it is as well. And amazingly, that's actually I'm getting this rebuild speed from external drives. So this shows how impressive that starttech.com card is. That it's yes, it looks like it is a pretty good card, especially being able to have 3 USB external drives attached to the card, and to get this kind of a speed for rebuild. That is actually, and you notice it's actually faster than the internal drives, but obviously this is actually a reshape, and reshapes are usually always slower than just a standard recovery, because standard recovery runs at full speed, whereas a reshape has to like read and write to the drives, which slows it down. Whereas this is just reading from 2 drives and writing to 1 drive, so that's why you're getting such a high speed. Yeah, 243. So that's really cutting its way through that rebuild at the moment. Of course, once it gets to the outer edge of the drive of the plates, it will actually slow down. But all I can say is that yeah, it's pretty impressive. The card, once I got it to work, of course, because one thing I did have a problem with it, where if I have the IOMMU enabled, the card actually wouldn't work. So I thought that, well, all that money was wasted. But now, once I did that workaround, the card seems to be operating in a pretty impressive way. So it's just gonna, well, yes, this is the card. First goes the internal one. Yeah, so this is it. So it's the actual chip itself is a Renesas technology UPD 720202 USB 3. And so this card has 4 controllers on it. So these are the 4 controllers. And like I say, then you've got it's got 4 PCI bridges. I think these are PCI bridge chips, which connect the 4 chips to the PCI Express bus. And it has to be said that they do a pretty impressive job. So I'll try and get a picture up of the card sort of now as well, if I remember. Well, I should do, just so you can see what it is, and also if they still sell it on Amazon as well, where I did buy it from, because sometimes I do buy stuff from eBay, but in this particular case, eBay didn't have, well, they might have had it, but I think the postage was too long, whereas with Amazon you tend to get quicker postage from it. So so there should be a picture of it up on the screen at this moment, and also the sort of picture showing it on Amazon as well, as long as they have it for sale there anyway. Okay, well, thanks for watching, and what I'll do is, I suppose that's it for now, because basically this RAID setup is actually working now, because even though it's doing the resync at the moment, basically I could still sort of get to the data that's in the backup location, and it's a bit slow because of the resync. So basically see the data's there. So hopefully some people might find this useful if they do actually want to do have a large enough RAID backup, so that but on an external drives, because obviously if needs be, I can disconnect the drives and put them in a safe or something, and then only take them out of the safe when I want to do a backup. And that's the good thing about this, rather than having the drives like sort of inside the actual machine itself. And of course, just like how I added a drive to this RAID 6, I could also, if I needed this backup to be bigger, I wouldn't have to try and somehow buy a 30 terabyte external. All I have to do is buy myself another 10 terabyte external, and then just add it as another drive to the RAID, and then just reshape it. And if at some point I get like super rich, I could even buy 2 of these externals and then reshape it to a RAID 6 as well. I mean, that would take forever, but this is the thing about using RAID for your backup disk, is that there are a lot of options you can use. And I suppose some people could, even if they're brave, put something like ZFS on them as well. Okay, so these are the 3 external drives that I'm using to actually set up the backup RAID. And like I said, the reason why I've done it this way is because if I ever need to increase the size of the RAID, then all I have to do is just buy another drive. And even if, say, I can't find any 10 terabyte drives anymore, then what I can do is just get a bigger one, say a 12 terabyte, and then what I just have to do then is I can then replace each of the other drives one at a time. So I can format the bigger drive just with the same partition size, and then if I ever need to, and then what I can do is I can then replace, if I get enough money anyways, especially considering how much these drives cost, I can then replace it with all of them with bigger drives. And then once I've got the last drive, which is the same big size, then I can just increase the size of the partition. So at the moment this is set up as a RAID 5, but I could do it as RAID 6 if I wanted to, but the USB card I've got at the moment only has 4 ports. So I suppose if I wanted more than 4 drives, I would need to get like 2 cards. But basically this, the thing I like about having the backup like this is that you have choices basically, so the data doesn't have to be wiped if I want to actually switch over to different drives eventually, or to go up to a RAID 6. And so basically the backup data can stay on the drives, whereas of course if you use one single drive, you always have to copy all the data all of the time. Okay, so that's basically the back of the USB card with the 4 ports. And then if we look inside, yeah, basically so that's the card there, and you can see the 4 USB ports there. And yeah, so basically it's actually, well, it's hard to see, but there are actually 4 USB chips on the card, and then there's 4 bridge chips as well. I think it's those bridge trips why I was having some problems with the you know, getting it to work with the IMMU enabled. But anyway, I'll include like an image also of the card as well.